Okay. Hopefully this is working now. Um, we'll see if it is. Um, haven't done a lot of live stuff where I'm actually screen sharing, so I haven't really done a lot of that, but I think we're good now. So I think we're working. So that's awesome. Uh, sorry it wasn't the originally scheduled one. I had to make a new one. But yeah, so this one should be a lot of fun. So yeah, this one should be a lot of fun. This will be the second year we're doing a subscriber league. This one will be a 10-team league. We're going to have pretty standard rosters. It's 2 running back, 3 wide receiver with a single flex. It's full PPR. We are of course doing an auction draft because we know we love auction drafts here. My personal favorite. I love auction drafts. It's a lot of fun. Love sharing that with everybody here. So hopefully we have a lot of fun with this. Strategy is a little bit different when you're in an auction draft. In a full PPR league, while you are going to fill 3 wide receiver spots in your starting lineup, you do want to make an effort to be a little bit more aggressive with the wide receiver position. So that's something we'll certainly be keeping in mind as we're doing this. So we'll see how this goes. Um, so yeah, hopefully you guys are enjoying this. If you guys have any comments or anything, let me know in the comments. Let me know how you guys feel the team went. It'll be a lot of fun looking at all that. I think it's working on the stream, so I think we should be good to go there. And yeah, we've got the draft starting in 4 minutes, so it should be a lot of fun. Um, so that should be super good. Let me go undo. I had originally scheduled a draft or a live stream, but I scheduled it wrong. It was supposed to be a webcam stream, so that obviously isn't what we were looking to do. So yeah, we're in the middle of a live draft right now. That one should be a lot of fun. And yeah, hopefully you guys are seeing this. It should be great. Yeah, we got the draft starting here in 3 minutes. Should be a lot of fun. I think we're all set, and um, hopefully you guys are enjoying this. Again, sorry for the mix-up with the original draft thing. I'll try and get better with these live streams and screen sharing and stuff as we go. So yeah, should be a lot of fun. Yeah, let's just sort of. I'm excited to get into it. We're gonna have $200, so pretty standard, full PPR. A lot of people that have been in the following the channel forever. We got 10 of us. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Really fun interacting with everybody. The winner of this league is for sure going to be in the league next year, and then there will be 8 open spots. We might open it up to a 12-team league if there's a little bit more interest. It was hard to get the 11th and 12th people to join this year, so we'll see how that goes. But it should be a lot of fun. I'm super stoked for this. This is one of the leagues that I do get pretty stoked about, pretty excited about on a week-to-week basis. So I love having that to look forward to every single week, and should be a lot of fun. So yeah, draft here will start here in 2.5 minutes. Hopefully things go well. I don't think I mean, it's always tough when you're drafting with a bunch of people that really know your tendencies, and obviously I talk to all of you guys all the time, and you guys are, pretty informed about how, what kind of players I like and all that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, but um, hopefully things are, um, hopefully things don't go too bad. Hopefully it's a lot of fun, and hopefully everybody has a good time on it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it for sure. Seems like my camera's not working. There we go. We got the camera going as well. So hopefully all the technical difficulties are sorted out. We should be ready to roll. I guess that's why we start these live streams a little bit before the draft, so that way we can get that rolling. So if any of you guys are watching this behind time, we can obviously just fast forward to the real draft. Hopefully it's a lot of fun for everybody, and should be a lot of fun. Yeah, so we've got 1 minute left here. I got 9 of us already in here. One guy we're still waiting to join. He's been pretty vocal and stuff though, so hopefully he'll make it. Worst case, we've got 1 auto, so not the end of the world if we end up with 1 auto pick, but obviously it's suboptimal. So we'll see. We've got one guy, poor Mason, seems to be joining and leaving every 30 seconds, so hopefully he gets his internet sorted out all there. Yeah, should be a lot of fun. 50 seconds here. So we look at the draft order here, the nomination order here. Not a huge deal when you're looking at that, but it is interesting. Just make note of that. You want to make note or take advantage of when you're nominating. So we're nominating 8. Doesn't really mean a whole lot, but we'll certainly keep that in mind. We're going to be intentional about the people we're nominating and all that. So hopefully that goes pretty well. Yeah, this should be a lot of fun here. You guys all know who like my general targets are for stuff like this. I've been really vocal about a lot of players, like you all know. Trey McBride's a personal favorite of mine. I'm obviously going to be targeting him. That Trey McBride Kyler stack is certainly something that I make a pretty concerted effort to get in every draft, and I'm sure it's going to be really difficult to make happen in this one because all 9 other people know exactly what I'm trying to do there. So one thing I'll note, and it's going to be pretty consistent with whatever drafts you're doing, because, especially when you're in your home leagues, you're going to have situations where I, without fail, forget to mute that. Sorry about that. So yeah, you'll have situations where everyone in your league knows exactly who you like. You've drafted with these people for, maybe 10, 20 years for some of you guys. And especially in an auction draft, it's kind of important to be more fluid and just be willing to take values when they're there. You might end up with a bunch of different players than what you were initially anticipating, but you're not going to put yourself in a spot where you're making bad selections just by doing that. So just keep that in mind. Be willing to draft players that aren't necessarily, at the top of mind. You want to be willing just to make sure you're taking value throughout the course of the draft, and that way you'll end up with the best roster you can, despite the fact that everybody in your league is, it'll feel like they're working against you, and they kind of are. So just be willing to take value as it presents itself and put yourself into the best spot to win whatever happens during the draft. So we've got CMC up here. Obviously, he's already up to $58. No problem overpaying for Christian McCaffrey if you want to. It's not exactly the approach I like to take. I find that some of the better values happen just a little bit later. But Christian McCaffrey's obviously, he's the RB1. He's going to be the RB1 again if he manages to stay healthy over the course of the season. It'll just be a matter of whether or not he can actually do that. It's really tough for these slightly older running backs coming off of massive touch seasons to actually continue putting up really monster numbers. But he certainly could. He's obviously an extremely talented player. He's sort of an outlier in terms of what you expect to see over the course of most players' careers. And if you want to take that gamble, I've got no problem on it. He's going to be an absolute stud. So we got a little bit of a mix-up here, not necessarily a mix-up, but just, a mix-up in terms of the general order here. We've got Amon-Ra currently being nominated as the second player. I don't hate doing that. What you're going to see here is generally when you nominate these guys, a little bit ahead of some of the other guys, so like CD and Tyreek. I generally find that you're going to look at him going for over that pre-draft value because he got nominated early, especially because if you're Mark here, Mark Lambert, you're sort of telling people that you want him, sort of in my mind, when you go down like that to nominate him, so... a little bit different. It seems like he didn't, but it's classic. You see a guy get nominated ahead of schedule, he's going to go earlier than that pre-draft value, just because everybody in the league has a bunch of money still. Amon-Ra is obviously a super fantastic player to have, and especially in a full PPR format, a really great guy to have on your roster. You could make a case for him belonging in the same tier as Amon-Ra or as Tyreek and CD, and I got no problem with him going for $55. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a matter of roster construction, how you want to approach that. Really interesting start there. Actually, we got bad intentions. They've got Christian McCaffrey and Amon-Ra. They're going to get a lot of receptions to start the season. Over the course of the entire season, they might get 200 receptions between those two guys. The full PPR, that's a really great spot to be in. Travis Kelce nominated here for $13. I'm actually going to be interested in that. Not going to really go a lot higher here. I personally have Trey McBride ranked higher, so I don't want to put myself in a spot where I'm overpaying for him because I think you can get McBride for $10 according to pre-draft value. Obviously, in this draft, I kind of have to expect to spend more than that on him, but it's still just a matter of I do feel like Trey McBride is going to be a better value for me than Kelce, and it'll be interesting to see what happens here. Bad Intentions seems pretty intent on getting their draft done pretty early here, really trying to fill that roster. If they do get Kelce here, that'll be a really top-heavy approach, being the team to draft the first 3 players nominated. And there he goes. He's being consistent about it. Shout out to Team 9 here, Monsters Inc. That was our champion from last season, so welcome back, Monsters Inc. You really did a great job last season. It was fun playing with you, and hopefully we can dethrone you this year. We're up to $25 for Travis Kelce. So that is certainly not something I'd be willing to do. Obviously, Kelsey's fantastic. It could easily pay off, but like you're paying the tight end 1 price tag for a guy that I don't think has a much better shot of being the tight end 1 than guys like Laporta, like not Amon-Ra, like McBride, like Mark Andrews. You could throw Kincaid in there if you want to as well. So not something I would do, but again, it's tough to necessarily say that it's a bad pick just because obviously we know what Kelce can do for us. We've got Ja'Marr Chase nominated here. Obviously a huge question mark heading into the start of the season here with Ja'Marr Chase. We know he's still holding out due to the contract dispute. In my opinion, it's a little silly of him to be holding out to this point just because he's still got 2 years left on his contract. It doesn't feel like he should be a guy that is doing that. At this value, though, I can't let that happen. I'm not going to let him go that cheap. There's obviously a high level of risk associated with it, but the fact of the matter is he's got a really great shot to be the wide receiver 1 if he can stay healthy over the course of the season and actually play. And I think that in general, it's going to put him in a spot where it's worth that risk just a little bit. I can't go a lot higher here. And it kind of sucks a little bit. Looks like Mason disconnected, so now he's auto-drafting Ja'Marr Chase. Not the worst thing, he's getting him at a good value, so it's totally fine. Mark stepping in here didn't want to make it happen, though. It's always nice to see someone who wasn't making that happen. So glad he went to someone that wasn't auto-drafting. Good to see that happen. Obviously, the value on Chase is there. It's a risky pick. It feels risky, and it's not necessarily something that I like to do because I generally, I like to say that you can't really win your league in your first round, but you can lose it, and in this case, it's with the first pick. And Ja'Marr Chase feels like the kind of pick that could lose you your draft. Like, he's not going to hold out the whole season. That's silly. He would roll over his contract year, and he'd be right back in the same spot next year. But he could hold out for a week or two, miss a couple games. He hasn't necessarily been practicing over the course of the offseason, so maybe he gets a slow start going into the year. And that's certainly a concern. I think that, when you're spending this level of capital, like I would prefer Amon-Ra to Ja'Marr Chase at this point. I'd obviously prefer both CD and Tyreek Hill. If I can get CD for 51, I'm certainly interested in that. I think he could be a real anchor to the roster and be someone that can, he could be the wide receiver 1 again, and he should be absolutely fantastic. So not going to force it here, but if you can get a value there, you got to be interested and see what can happen there. His contract dispute, that's obviously resolved now. He got that 4-year, $136 million deal. He's going to play all year. He's going to be a rock star. He's really all the Cowboys have. And I had no problem with taking him as the wide receiver 1 if you have the first overall pick and you're worried about Christian McCaffrey and you're in like a 3 wide receiver 2 flex league. Full PPR, I think you could make a strong argument for taking CD 101. So he's obviously fantastic. It's just a matter of how much risk you want to balance there. Puka, another interesting guy. Sounds like he'll be ready to go week 1. That's what Sean McVay told us earlier this week. So that's obviously promising. It's what we want to see. We want to see Puka be on the field for the whole 17 weeks. We want to make sure that he's going to be healthy and play all 17 games. And it's great to see that he's going to start week 1. Makes me a little bit less worried about the injury. I generally like to avoid players that are injured going into week 1. It's just there's a lot of risk associated with injury in the NFL over the course of the entire season, and starting the year banged up really puts you behind the 8 ball a little bit. But for a little bit of value there at 42, I've got no problem. But again, I just tend to be a little bit risk averse early on in the draft. I don't want to take guys that I feel like have a shot at potentially like torpedoing my team. And I don't think Puka can necessarily do that, but there is a path. There's a lot of outs for him potentially being a bad draft pick. There's his own injury. There's the possibility, however small it might be, of Cooper Kupp just ending up being the wide receiver 1 for that team. Like, Kupp wasn't healthy last year, and Puka obviously stepped up, and Puka's fantastic. And I think Puka's probably the number 1 for that team, but if you want to make an argument for Cooper Kupp, you certainly could. We know how elite Cooper Kupp's been when he's healthy, and then there's obviously the concerns with Matthew Stafford and his health as well. Stafford has missed a lot of time over the course of his career. He's already missed some practice this year with a bit of an injury. If he were to miss time, you're looking at a significant downgrade going from Stafford to Jimmy Garoppolo. And there's just reasons to be a little bit concerned with Puka, but again, the value's there. If you want to take the shot on it, I've got no problem there. Bijan, I was interested there. I was going to do it if I could, but it just didn't quite come around for me, so we're not going to be able to do that. Personal favorite of mine, someone I've been targeting in a lot of drafts right now. A.J. Brown, someone that I think is going to be an absolute rock star this year. He's a guy that with Kellen Moore, I think he's going to be a guy they're going to move around a lot like we saw them do with CD 2 years ago, with Keenan Allen last season. Those are guys that put up career years under Kellen Moore, and I think A.J. Brown is in line for that similar treatment. This is an Eagles team that, as great as they are, their defense is trending in the opposite direction as the offense. There's going to be a lot of opportunity here for this team to need to put up a lot of points, and I think that A.J. Brown's got an outside shot at being the wide receiver one this season. I'm willing to overpay just a little bit for him. He's someone that I'm super stoked about this year, and as my wide receiver one, I feel like he's a really solid anchor to the roster, and especially in a full PPR, I value the wide receiver position more. I want to make sure that, in general, I'm very okay if my best player is a wide receiver, and that's something that I was comfortable doing here. So A.J. Brown comes to us. We've got, $152 left. Again, the things I always like to throw out, you want to keep sure you're monitoring your salary cap here, keep track of your budget. So we know that my kicker and defense, that's going to be $1 each. Gives me $150 for the rest of the roster. All 7 bench spots here, those are probably going to be $1, maybe $2. So I generally would say I'd budget like $10 for my bench. That's going to put me in a spot where I've got 7 other roster spots to fill for $140. I can spend, by that math, $20 per spot. Obviously, we're not going to spend $20 on each player here, but it's good to keep that in mind. Just want to keep that in the back of your head that, I need to save $12 for, the ancillary parts of my roster, the kicker, defense, and bench. That means I've got an extra 140 remaining to fill out the rest of that starting lineup. So that's just sort of how I keep track of it. If I end up with extra money at some point, if I realize I'm not going to be able to spend all of that on my starting lineup, I still want to have a bit of a top-heavy bench. I want to make sure that I'm getting, 1 or 2 really good players on my bench rather than getting a bunch of guys that are going to be maybe useful. Because if you just look at your rosters that you've drafted over the last couple of years, you'll notice that by the end of the year, you didn't have a very similar team to what you drafted, and there's going to be a lot of turnover, especially on your bench, and you want to make sure that you're willing to, mix and match and make sure you're willing to make those waiver acquisitions over the course of the season and put yourself in a spot to succeed there. Really funny this year seeing Chris Olave go for so much less than we saw him go last year. I'll go up to 34. I'm not going to overpay there, but that's the problem with having an auto here. It looks like he's going to, the pre-draft value is pretty set in stone for those auto picks. So we're going to have to deal with that. That's no problem, though. Although Tony Montana is getting involved here. It'd be a really good start to his roster, going Puka and Chris Olave. It's a really solid wide receiver core. It's tough to argue with that. So really great to see that. I like, in general, not seeing the auto win players they just bid up, so that's fun to see. For me, I'm willing to target some high-end players here, but in general, I don't necessarily like being too top-heavy on my roster. Like, I'll take value if it presents itself, and I'm not going to put myself in a spot where I'll avoid really good players just because I've already taken one. So, not saying that at all, but in general, I like to have, one anchor to my roster and then a bunch of guys that I think are just going to be really solid, like rock stars, but not superstars for me. And it means that I need to see a really significant value to take another one of these top tier guys. So I'm going to need to see, like, if Saquon goes for 40, I'll be interested. If Tyreek Hill goes for 50, I'll be interested. But, in general, I'm not going to, overpay for any of these guys now that I've already overpaid a little bit for a guy that I really liked, because I don't want to have so few dollars to go for the rest of my roster. And I think there's a lot of guys later on that I'm really satisfied with the values on. And it also puts me in a spot where if you spend a lot of money early on, you can't necessarily take advantage of the values that are going to present themselves over the course of the rest of the draft because, say you spend all of your money on 4 players early and then, we're 50 picks into the draft and you see, holy cow, there's players that are going for $30 normally that are going for 10 because everyone's spent a bunch of money, or nobody wants Mike Evans, for example, and he's going for super cheap, but you don't have the money to get involved. You don't want to put yourself in a spot where you can't take values because you spent all that money early on. So I like to have a little bit of flexibility over the course of the draft. I don't normally like to be too top heavy with my roster. So what Bad Intentions has done, that's certainly not the approach I normally take. He's going to have a really good top heavy roster and he's going to have to fill in the pieces, and it can certainly work. It's just not normally how I like to approach my auction drafts. If I can avoid it, obviously if value presents itself, I'm going to take that value and make sure that I'm still doing the best I can with what's presented there. But I'm not going to force a really top heavy roster there. Whew. Okay, we got Achane going up here. Achane's someone certainly that you're going to see go for a really wide range of outcomes here, especially nominating him this early. I would not be shocked at all to see him go for $30, $40. I was in a very high-end buy-in draft just earlier this week. Pre-draft value for Achane was $20 in that draft, and he ended up going for $45. So just keep that in mind. Achane is pretty heavily undervalued on the ESPN platform. I think people in general know that. You're seeing that here. Everyone in this league is pretty sharp. We're seeing situations here where we're looking at Achane going for $28. I'm willing to go around there. I think 30 is right around what I'd be willing to consider here. But, on most platforms, he's going in the second round. And by that metric, there's no reason he shouldn't be a 35, $40 asset right around the guys of like he's generally drafted around Derrick Henry, Isaiah Pacheco, those kinds of guys. And if you look at that, just the pre-draft value says that he should be that expensive. And just because the pre-draft value on ESPN specifically is not saying that, doesn't mean that that's not true. So I do think De'Von Achane's a screaming value on ESPN, especially at his pre-draft value. If you're in a league with a bunch of people who don't necessarily know that, if you can get him around that pre-draft value, I absolutely would, because he's going to be a huge leg up for you, and he's not someone that I think the average person is willing to take the risk on. But really fun seeing people here that are sharp and really ahead of things and understand what's going on here. They know he's worth the upside because he could easily be a league winner. So good pick by Mark there. I know he overpaid by pre-draft value, but no problem with spending 36 on Achane. It's perfectly fine. So we got Mahomes here. No problem with Mahomes. It's interesting to see. Obviously, we saw good intent or bad intentions nominate him. If you remember earlier on, we saw this guy draft Travis Kelce. Very reasonable to assume that he's looking to just complete that stack. I'd be surprised if he doesn't make an effort to leave this with him. There we go. It's a situation where I would have considered potentially bidding him up just because I feel like he's not going to want to leave without him. I feel like I was pretty confident he'd be willing to overpay here, and that's just something to keep an eye on over the course of your draft as well. You're going to be looking at a situation where if you see somebody very clearly trying to set themselves up for a stack, you can kind of force them to overpay here. That's sort of what Chilean Condors is doing here. He knows pretty confidently that Bad Intentions really wants to leave this draft with Patrick Mahomes. And so but the thing is that I will still always argue, don't place bids that you're not going to be comfortable winning. So like, even if I'd feel pretty confident that if I bid right now, Bad Intentions will outbid me. I don't want to win this draft at this point. Like, this draft, I don't want to spend $22, $23 on Patrick Mahomes, so I wouldn't try to bid the guy up. But if you're on the fence about it, if you'd still be satisfied enough with that sort of draft pick, I've got no problem doing that, because it is going to put you in a spot where you're either getting a player that you'd be happy with at their price, or you're making someone else in your draft spend more money, and it's still a win for you because they can't bid you up later on in the draft. So, something to keep in mind. Derrick Henry is someone that I'm really high on this season. I know that in full PPR, obviously the value is a little bit lower than in half or non-PPR, so certainly something to keep in mind. But I think there's a very realistic opportunity here for Derrick Henry to lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns this year. We saw Gus Edwards put up 13 touchdowns in Baltimore last season. Derrick Henry is a much better player than Gus Edwards, and I think a lot of people are a little just, they're tired of Derrick Henry. He's an older guy. He's been around. He's not a sexy name anymore. He's on a new team. And, I mean, he's not going to catch passes. It's fair to assume that. But he could very easily be top 10 running back, top 5 running back this season if he can just fall in the end zone 10 to 15 times. I think a 20-touchdown season is certainly in the range of outcomes for him. And if I have to anchor my roster with him, if he ends up as my RB1, I think that's completely fine. I'm going to let him slide here because there's still a lot of running backs left on the board, and I want to see if I can get a value somewhere else. So I'm going to let that happen. But I'd have had no problem spending $20 or $30 on Derrick Henry. 31 would have been totally fine. I think he's well worth that. He's someone that could easily be... I mean, if he ends up being a top 3 running back, I won't be at all shocked. It would happen, certainly, just because he scores 20-something touchdowns. We saw Mostert do that last season in really good offenses, players that get all the goal line work. They've got that sort of that touchdown upside, and we know Derrick Henry. He might be one of the best goal line running backs in NFL history. So, very fair to assume that Derrick Henry is going to return value here, and the only real concern there is injury, and he really hasn't been injury prone. He had one stretch of games like 2-3 years ago where he missed 8 games, but he came right back, played the whole next year. Derrick Henry's a stud. The Ravens have been really vocal about wanting to give him a ton of work, and they don't really have anybody else in that offense they can even give touches to. So Derrick Henry's going to be awesome. I've got no problem with it. Another guy who's awesome, Tyreek Hill. Probably the wide receiver 1 or 2 again this season. We know he's going to be featured in this Dolphins offense. He is by far the best player on the field when they're playing. Voted by the NFL players to be the best player in the NFL last season. And on top of that, you've got a situation where Jalen Waddle, he's been missing a lot of time. He's been in a non-contact jersey for most of the last several weeks. And at this point, it's worth being a little bit concerned about it. On the flip side, though, Tyreek Hill, he's been dealing with a thumb injury. Tough to really know what's going on there. But if Tyreek Hill's actually injured, if he's going to miss significant time, there'd be a lot of reason to be concerned there. So I've got no problem taking him. I think really, though, what it says to me is that I think CeeDee Lamb is the safest pick you can make at the wide receiver position because, or at least at the top level, because you've got Tyreek Hill is sort of dealing with an injury. Jamar Chase, contract holdout. Justin Jefferson, bad quarterback play. Amon-Ra, he's super safe. I've got no problem with that. But like a lot of these top tier guys have question marks, and I completely understand people that maybe want to go running back early on because like CMC, Bijan, uh, Gibbs, mostly Jonathan Taylor, Brees Hall, all those guys, they feel relatively safe. Kyren doesn't really fit that mold anymore with the punt return news that's coming out, but in general, I think that these guys are pretty safe draft picks in the first round, other than the fact that running backs tend to be a little bit more injury prone, and there are a lot more situational question marks surrounding the wide receivers at the top of the draft and the running backs. So I get why maybe if you want to be a little bit more aggressive towards running back, it does make a little bit of sense. I cannot let Jonathan Taylor go for $32. I was going to get involved there. He's not really someone that I target very often, but he is somebody that I'm happy to get for like $40. And like I view him in a really similar mold to Isaiah Pacheco, Travis Etienne. They're similar players to me, and if I can get him at a value, I'll be absolutely satisfied with that. Not someone I've really targeted in drafts. He's not a guy that I think is necessarily someone to be going after at cost, but if you can get him at a value, which I think is going to happen in a lot of drafts because people are a little bit scared of it, I've got no problem doing it. I'll go up to probably like 45 here. And if I do that, I'm probably punting the RB2 spot. I'll be down here. But that's just one way to build a roster. I think in general, in a 3 wide receiver full PPR format, it's going to be really rare that you'll see me spend up on 2 running backs. I don't think it necessarily makes a lot of sense to do that. Just because I think the wide receiver position is obviously so valuable here, and I think especially in full PPR, you can tend to find guys that are going to be a little bit more valuable later on, and guys that are like going to be sneaky useful. I'm going to nominate Kyren just to see what happens in terms of what with his pre-draft value. I know there's a lot of concerns with people about obviously the punt return comments made by Sean McVay. Their offensive coordinator echoed that sentiment earlier today as well. They're saying positive things about Kyren. They're saying that obviously he's a playmaker. They want to get the ball in his hands because good things happen for them when it's in his hands, and I totally get that, and I think I kind of believe them. So I've got no problem taking Kyren. I think he's like he should be going a little bit later than where he's been being drafted, but I think he's still a pretty safe draft pick. God, I don't think people want to let me get value in this draft. Which makes sense. Obviously, everyone's here. They're coming in to beat me here. But I think that in general, I think Kyren's going to be a guy that can be really useful. God dang it. So I'm gonna let him go there. I think he needs to be brought down by an ADP just a little bit. He's not someone that I think, I had him ranked as like my RB4 for a stretch of time. I think now I have Saquon and Gibbs ahead of him. Jonathan Taylor's ahead of him is for me as well, but he's probably like my RB7 at this point, like hanging right around that Pacheco range. So I think he's fairly priced, maybe a couple dollars overdone, but he's not a guy that I'm necessarily spiking and down in my rankings. I just think that there are enough concerns that it's worth making note of it, just keeping track of it. I think if you do draft Kyren, especially in an auction format where you have complete control over it, it probably makes a lot of sense just to force Blake Corum onto your roster. Even if you overpay, even if you spend $5, it's an insurance policy that will pay off. Like at worst case, you got your stud running back in Kyren Williams, and in the best case, well, I don't know, not necessarily best case because you'll have lost Kyren, but the worst thing that can happen is that you draft Kyren, spend up like crazy on him, and then, there's a non-zero chance that we see. This is the Rams. We saw what they did with Cam Akers last season. There is a possibility where we go into the season, the Rams receives a first punt, Kyren goes out there and fair catches it, and then out trots Blake Corum onto the field for the first drive of the year. I really don't think that's going to happen. I'd be very shocked, and I do think that Kyren Williams is still the clear RB1 in that backfield, and he's a guy that does have top 3 upside of the position. We saw him do it last season, so I don't want to disclaim that, and he's obviously a guy that I'm still excited to see play football, but there's just a lot of questions there, and it's a little bit scary there with Kyren, so I think that I tend to lean towards some safer options if you can. My home league, he's going to be my keeper. I got him for free last year, basically, so of course I'm going to keep him at that value. It didn't scare me off of that. Like my keeper options, I could have Achane or him for free. Basically, I think I'm still going to keep Kyren, so I do prefer Kyren to Achane if that's a tiebreaker for any of you guys, but just something to keep in mind. I think there's a lot of reasons to be concerned there, and I think that I still view him as a top 10 running back, but maybe not a top 5 guy like he was previously. While I was ranting about Kyren Williams, we saw Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson go. 2 receivers that I'm not very high on. They're obviously really talented receivers. It's just their situations that I don't like. I think the Raiders are going to be an extremely run-heavy offense with bad quarterback play. And, I think there's a lot of reasons to expect a drop-off for Davante Adams, even from last season where he was a disappointment. He's being drafted as a top 10 wide receiver again. I just can't get behind that. Ayuk again, really nice to see now that we've got some stability there. We know he's obviously going to be in San Francisco for this year and years to come, so that obviously makes things a little bit easier. It's good to have that in the back of our minds here. Makes him a safe, like a wide receiver too for me. I don't think he's got top 10 upside at the position. This is a Niners offense that I expect to be a little bit less efficient this season. Ayuk, obviously, with no training camp, it's fair to expect a slow start for him as well, along with this entire offense. Like, if Trent Williams doesn't play, we've seen Brock Purdy and this offense really struggle without Trent Williams. Just go back to last season, they lost 3 games in a row without Deebo Samuel and without Trent Williams playing. So there are reasons to be a little bit concerned about what's going to happen with the Niners this season. I think their offense could take a small step back, but no real concern there. I think there's plenty of reason to be comfortable with Ayuk. I just don't think the upside's really there. Jahmyr Gibbs is certainly interesting. I'll go to 40. I'm not going to really go higher than that, but I think if, in a full PPR format, if he ends up just being my RB1, I think that's totally fine. Sucks to see Lambert. I think Lambert's going to win this on auto, so I might be willing just to spend the extra $2 to keep that from happening. I don't like watching autos spend up on players, and this is a pick I was going to be okay making anyway, so comfortable with that. We got Jahmyr Gibbs. He's probably going to be the only running back I spend up on. I think that we'll look to just fill like with a budget RB2 here, but now between Jahmyr Gibbs and A.J. Brown, that's a really solid start to the roster. That's certainly something that I'll be really confident in going into week 1, and I can really build around that. So there's certainly a lot of reason to be optimistic about that start. Josh Allen nominated here. Not necessarily a bad nomination or a bad price, actually. They're relatively cheap on ESPN, which is surprising. They're in like that low $20 range. I think that's a perfectly fine price to be paying for these top tier quarterbacks. Personally, for me, I have A.J. Brown already, so I still lean towards trying to draft Jalen Hurts if I'm going to go with one of these top tier guys. Just because stacking is a lot more fun, gives you a lot more upside on your roster, and it's normally how I'd like to do things. So, not that I'm out on Josh Allen if I end up with A.J. Brown or any of that, but I do think that Jalen Hurts might be a target of mine here. It's a little bit tougher with the bigger starting lineup, just because when you're looking at a starting lineup with 3 full wide receivers, bigger starting lineups, the tight end, the quarterback positions, they get valued a little bit less just because they're a smaller portion of your starting lineup. So you got to keep that in mind. Seeing Michael Pittman go cheap here. I've seen him go cheap in a lot of drafts. I was in a huge buy-in draft earlier this week. I got him for like $20. I don't know that I even felt good about it, though. He's not a guy that I've really been targeting over the course of the season. I think there's a lot of reasons to be concerned about what's going to happen with Pittman this year. I think that you're making a lot of assumptions if you're spending up on him. You're obviously dealing with Anthony Richardson, who needs to step up and be a better passer of the football than we've ever seen him be. I think there's a lot more target competition in Indianapolis than people give them credit for either. Like Josh Downs is good. He was just got hurt at the end of training camp, but when he's back on the field, he's going to be a contributor. A.D. Mitchell, he's looked great this training camp. He's obviously going to be a part of things. There's 3 good receivers there. Pittman's still clearly the wide receiver 1, but I don't think you can really expect like a 30% target share out of Pittman. I think you're probably looking at like a 23-24% target share, and you're going to need them to be a really high octane, fast-paced offense for him to pay off at his ADP there. So just checking in with our budget here again. Another thing that I always like to do, of course. I like to just sort of make sure that, we're on track to spend our full budget and make sure that we're not going to overpay anywhere here. So what we'll look at here, we spent $91 total. We've got to spend $12 between our kicker, defense, and our bench spots. That gives us $97 left for the remaining 6 spots on our starting lineup. Just good to keep that in mind. It means, we're looking at like $15+ per player the rest of the way. Nothing that's concerning there. I think, we're looking at RB2 here. We're going to look to spend down there. We're going to look to get someone like Tony Pollard, David Montgomery, Najee. Montgomery's not someone that scares me at all. I don't mind dipping there. Gives me a lot of security at the running back position just because if Jahmyr Gibbs goes down, I still got a superstar. And also, I think I can just pretty confidently play both of them if I need to. So, I have no problem taking David Montgomery. I think it's going to be a good year for both of those guys, and I wouldn't mind just playing them both and riding the Lions' backfield if I needed to. So that's an option. So we're going to save a lot of money there. Mostert, you guys know, he's, of course, an option for me at $2. I'm not going to get him for $2, not in this draft. These guys are too sharp. So that's not going to happen. But, we can certainly keep that in the back of our minds. We're going to spend down on the running back 2 position in all likelihood, unless a really crazy value presents itself. So like I would need to see someone go for $10 under their pre-draft value and be a guy that I like. So, like if Kamara goes for 20, I'll consider it. If James Cook goes for 20, I'll consider it. White for 20. Josh Jacobs for 20 is actually a pretty good option. I'm really excited to see what Jacobs can do here. So, I'd consider spending up to Jacobs there, but I wish to see what's going to happen there at receiver. Lots of guys I'm super excited about. I think that because we spent up on a running back, I'm probably not going to target this top tier area here. Like tight end, I'm going to make sure that I get one of these guys. Quarterback, I think I'm going to target Jalen Hurts potentially. But I think what we're going to do here, I think we're going to nominate David Montgomery and just accept that I'm going to overpay for it a little bit. Like I'll be willing to go up to like $8 potentially. Just get myself that RB2, really secure the RB2 spot here, and then I don't have to worry about it the rest of the draft. One thing you'll notice is that when you get later on in these drafts, a lot of these, mid-tier RB2s, you'll see guys in this draft that are going to have a lot of money left, and when that happens, they're going to overpay for these guys just because they want to fill out their starting lineup. They're desperately needing an RB2, and they have the money to do it, and getting Monty for 5, that's awesome. I think that he's certainly a guy that is going to be, someone I can rely on as my RB2 here, and I'll feel really good about him over the course of the season. And he also makes me feel a lot more comfortable having taken Jahmyr Gibbs there. So, really excited about that. Harrison here, he's going cheap. I am interested there. Obviously, you guys know I've been super excited about Marvin Harrison here. Of course, it sucks. We've got Ben here. Pre-draft value sort of going to dictate things here the rest of the way until this guy runs out of money, or the pre-draft values are going to be really what drives the cost of all these guys when you have an auction draft in your auto drafter in here. So a little bit of a bummer to see that. I'm still willing to overpay here and get Marvin Harrison. It's not even an overpay. It's sort of like overreaching what I can really afford, but I've got no problem with it. Harrison's a guy that I'm super excited about. If he ends up as my wide receiver 2, I think I have to at least consider that because he's someone that, I've got plenty of money left. I still have $104. Again, we're spending $12 on our kicker, defense, and bench. So, now we've just got Marvin Harrison there. I feel like we can really just build out a decent wide receiver room behind that. It does make me a little bit more scared about drafting Trey McBride. I did take both of them in one of my higher value drafts, like one of my higher buy-in drafts. So I'm not afraid of doing that, but it's concerning. You're really exposing yourself to the Cardinals if you do that. So I get it if you don't want to take that approach. Like for me, I would prefer to get Dalton Kincaid at cost now than Trey McBride because I think that Dalton Kincaid has almost as much upside here, and he's going to make me feel a little bit more comfortable now that I'm not too close to one roster. So Kincaid's the target for me at tight end now. We've got $73 left. That means we've got $61 for the rest of our starting lineup. That's, it's got to be 4 spots. So we're looking at just over $15 a spot here. So just got to, keep budgeting that appropriately. The things we'll keep in mind is if we target Jalen Hurts here, we're spending $21 on him. That means we've got to save money somewhere else. So hopefully that would work out. If we can get Jalen Hurts for 21, get Dalton Kincaid for 5, we're right on track there. So that's certainly something we can consider. The wide receiver position, looking at guys that I love the value on here. I think that Calvin Ridley is a really solid value, as is T. Higgins. George Pickens, I love the value on. Tank Dell is a great value. Deontay. I guess I didn't need to type that. But yeah, so yes, Paul, you guys can listen to me live, even though you're drafting. I'm well aware that you guys can abuse that, and I'm telling you guys exactly what I'm thinking. So make this a little bit more difficult on me, but that's all right. It should be a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys are having a lot of fun too. Trey McBride, obviously someone that I'm super interested in. I'm obviously still going to target him here, even though I have Marvin Harrison. I'm still winning my leagues too. I wheel and deal a lot. I make a lot of trades. I'm not as worried about overexposing myself to one team because I think I can maneuver that around if I think there's going to be a problem. And on top of that, I don't necessarily think there's going to be a problem. I think that this Cardinals offense is going to be really, really good, and I think that I can get by having 2 Cardinals. They're going to be high end, and if it doesn't work out, then I'll eat crow there and be wrong. But I think it's going to be plenty fine. I'm not going to put myself in a spot where I'm going to overpay for Trey McBride here, though, just because I already have Marvin Harrison. Under normal circumstances, if I didn't have Harrison, I'd have been certainly willing to overpay for him because I think he's someone that can be the tight end one. But because I already have Marvin, he's just not someone that I'm really willing to overpay for because I don't want that much exposure there. So next up here, we got Jalen Hurts. He's someone that I'm really excited to see what he's going to be able to do this season. I think he's potentially in line for a career year, and I've got A.J. Brown, so I'm absolutely targeting him. If I don't get him, I'm not going to overpay because I still love Kyler Murray. He's someone I can get. He's going to be a lot cheaper. And the other thing I'll note is that in a 10-team league, as much as I think that having a high-end quarterback is a huge advantage, like there are really great values the rest of the way. There are 10 quarterbacks that I'm really satisfied with, so I'll spend up to 20 here, but I'm not going to overpay for Hurts. If I don't get him, I'll take Kyler Murray for $5 later. I can roll that over into better receivers the rest of the way. I'll feel really solid about that roster. So no problem with that. Good job, Mark. You can have him. Um, yep, Ed pointing out that I was going for the stack. I did try there, but I just didn't want to put myself in a bad spot the rest of the way, and I was willing to wait because I can still get a stack with Harrison. I do value stacking quite a bit, and it's something that I do want to emphasize that you should prioritize a little bit if you can. Um, it matters a lot more in best ball than in like redraft like this, but it does raise your weekly and season long ceiling. And I do think that it's gonna put you, you're gonna have a little bit higher lows, a little bit or higher highs and a little bit lower lows if you got a stack on your roster. But it is going to open up a lot of potential here, and it's going to put you in a spot. We're all playing here to win our league. We're not trying to get second or third. Nobody wants to get sixth place here. We're all trying to get first. And if you don't get first, to me, I don't really care if I get last. So being risky like that, taking on a little bit more risk and a little bit more exposure to a team that I think is going to be really good is not something that scares me. So stacking is something that I do try to do, but don't force it. You don't need to like overpay for a quarterback just to get it. You don't need to downgrade your quarterback just to get a good one. Like if you draft Amon-Ra, you don't need to pencil in Jared Goff as your quarterback. You can be just fine not stacking that position. It's still going to be great, but it's just like a nice tiebreaker for me. So I don't go out of my way to like force it, but it's certainly something that I'm willing to do if I can. So here we got Javonte. I think for $3 is a perfectly fine value. In fact, I would have been willing to spend 4. Okay, I'm glad someone else did. I already have my RB2, and I'm more interested in trying to fill out the rest of my wide receivers. But in a full PPR, I think that both Broncos running backs, Javonte and Jaleel McLaughlin, are both going to be pretty valuable. I think Jaleel McLaughlin might end up being like the most popular waiver wire pickup in Week 1. He's someone that I've been drafting at the end of drafts pretty frequently because I think he could legitimately be a low-end RB2 for us in full PPR. He's someone that I'm stoked to see what he can do this year. I think he's a lot more explosive than Javonte. I think he's a good player, and I think that there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic about what he can do in a Sean Payton offense led by Bo Nix, where they're really going to emphasize trying to throw the ball to the running back position. They love throwing the ball behind the line of scrimmage. I think there's a lot of upside to that backfield, and especially McLaughlin, who I think could potentially, if he catches 80 passes this year, I won't be shocked at all. So I overpaid, quote unquote, for Trey McBride there. Spent $8 on him, even though his pre-draft value is 5. I've got no problem overpaying there. Just personally, for me, if you look at the tight end position here, I sort of view Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, and Dalton Kincaid sort of all as like tier 1 guys. To be completely honest, I think they've all got a shot to finish as the tight end 1 this season. Kincaid maybe being the least likely to do it, but I think he sort of belongs in that tier, and he's going for half as much of those guys. I think he's, arguably the best value at the position on ESPN. Njoku's someone that I think is a really good value, and as is Jake Ferguson on ESPN as well. But at least if guys left, obviously Trey McBride's my favorite. But don't feel bad about overpaying by a couple dollars there. Like that's why these tier-based rankings are so important, is because I feel really good about making Dalton Kincaid my tight end 1. He's someone that I'm going to feel really good about throughout the course of the season. I don't view him as a significant downgrade from Andrews, from Kincaid, from McBride, from Kelce, from Laporta. And so even though I spent more than that pre-draft value, I got him for cheaper than any of those other guys went for, and I think that was well worth it. Drake London for 38. That's a lot of fun. Really fun seeing these guys, put their foot down on some guys they're excited about. For me here, we're getting to the point in the draft where I do sort of, we're a little bit later on, so I'm willing to sort of nominate guys that I like quite a bit. I'm going to nominate T. Higgins, who's someone that I'm actually really trying to almost emphasize trying to get on my roster at this point. He's someone that I was already really high on and thought he was going to have a really great bounce back year in this Bengals offense, but I think that even more, there's added upside if Ja'Marr Chase chooses to sit out a few weeks. T. Higgins could easily be a guy that puts up a monster stretch to start the season, and if that happens, he could be a big difference maker for us in fantasy. So we've got to keep that in mind. I think Trey, especially as my wide receiver 3, he's someone that I'll be super stoked to have on the roster, and I'm willing to spend up there. Again, I've got $65 left. That means I've got $53 per to spend on the rest of my starting lineup, and that's only 3 roster spots here, so I can overpay just a little bit. I'm going to overpay just a little bit there. It's not something that scares me. $16. I view him in a really similar tier to guys like Calvin Ridley, Cooper Kupp. I'll let him go now, but he's someone that I was, emphasizing trying to get on my roster, and I'm not going to force it. Of course, I don't want to put myself in a bad spot, but I think it was a perfectly fine thing to spend $17 on him there. Just taking a look though, we've got $53 to spend on the rest of our lineup. At the quarterback position, we're probably spending 5 or less, to be completely honest. So that means we've got $48 for 2 spots. If we just look at this here, it means we can spend just over 20 the rest of the way, or on each of these 2 spots. I think what might happen here is I might target maybe one more running back. I think getting Josh Jacobs, if I can get him a reasonable value, is certainly something that's worth my time. He's someone that I think is in line for a massive workload this year. If I can get him and maybe pair him with Cooper Kupp, it'd be something that would make me feel really good about my wide receiver room. And then having that third running back that I still think is going to catch a lot of passes, I'd feel pretty good about that. Then we'll just sort of start targeting those like $1 quality bench guys. Good to sort of nominate those guys maybe a little bit earlier before they run out. Guys that, everyone in the league is going to be on the edge about maybe spending that extra dollar on because they don't want to put themselves in that spot. But not guys that are just going to be automatically bid on just because you put them out for $1. So we'll see how that goes. Obviously, a long way to go here, but I think we're off to a really great start with this draft. Always fun to sort of look around here as well. Just keep an eye on those maximum offers. So we've got, $27 looks like the low end of things here. So nobody's really poor just yet. So there's a lot of people that everybody can put their foot down at some point for a player they really want. So there's nobody that's really priced out of anybody at this point yet. So obviously we'll keep that in mind. It's good to see that. Cooper Kupp, I think he's really undervalued right now. I think there's a case to be made for him being like a round 3, maybe even like a late round 2 value at this point, and I think I'm willing to overpay just a little bit for him. I know there's a lot of risk associated with having him on my roster. Obviously, it's been a down 2 years for him, but the upside really is there. Oh man, okay, I can't do that though. I'm not going to get too overexposed here, but I do think it's a perfectly fine draft pick to make, and if you want to overpay like crazy for Kupp, I think there's a lot of reasons to consider doing it. So no problem with it, but obviously I just couldn't bring myself to spending $30 here. I think you're going to see in a lot of drafts, you're going to see Kupp, you're going to see Achane. So those 2 specifically, those are going to be guys that I think go for a lot more in these sharp drafts than guys in like your standard home leagues. If you're in a home league with a bunch of people who don't necessarily know what they're doing, I highly recommend that you target Cooper Kupp, target Devon Achane on these platforms. They're really screaming values, and the people that don't necessarily know or aren't as tuned into things, I don't think they're going to understand how great of a value these guys are. $36, that's a lot. I'm not doing that, but I don't have necessarily a problem with it. I just think that there's obviously a lot of risk associated with doing it, and I wouldn't have been able to bring myself to take that on. And excuse me for taking sips of beverage as we go along here. It's tough to talk for what's probably going to end up being 2 hours straight here, maybe longer. So hopefully it works out. Hopefully I can keep the voice rolling, but we'll see how that goes. See, I got Mark here putting up his player. Mark Andrews comes up. No problem with that. I think that obviously it was great to see him practice this year or this week. Hopefully he can be healthy and play the full season. That's just the really only concern with him is that there are obviously concerns that he's obviously been injury prone. He's missed a lot of time over the last several years. There are reasons to be concerned that could continue, especially given the car accident he had earlier this month. Sounds like it's nothing serious. I don't think he's going to miss a lot of time, and I think he's a good value. But I think more and more he's my 5th favorite tight end, even though I still think he's in that tier 1 for me. So if you look at this here, I think Nico Collins is certainly someone to consider. More and more I look at it, I think that, okay, I've got these $53 to spend on my starting lineup. If I spend 29 on Nico, spend 21 on Josh Jacobs, that's 50. I then spend $3 on my quarterback. I get Kyler or Jordan Love, and then I have $10 for my bench. That's going to put me in a really good spot. My starting lineup's going to be stacked with that. And that receiving core of A.J. Brown, Marvin Harrison, and Nico Collins, like, they're guys that are all going late round 1 and, between the end of round 1 and through the end of round 2. And I think that there's obviously like it's tough to get three guys like that and also get Jahmyr Gibbs, and then I'm still pairing that with decent players like Kyler and David Montgomery and Dalton Kincaid. Josh Jacobs is a guy who's going to be going in like the third round of a lot of drafts right now. I think that'd be a really, really awesome team to have, and would be super stoked to get that. James Cook also a consideration, someone I've been really high on this season, so we'll see what the value comes out at here. I got a comment here in the stream as well from Isaac. Hey man, I'm in a 16-team half PPR competitive auction league on Sleeper. If you are going to plant your flag on 4 players, who are you going with there? Okay, so I guess the question is, what 4 players do I have the most conviction in there? Someone that I do find myself drafting a ton of, and I really just can't keep myself from doing it. Trey McBride, he's a personal favorite of mine. I would absolutely be targeting him. The one thing I'll note though is that when you're in a 16-team league, the tight end position matters a little bit less, just because they're everybody's team's going to be thin. So when you're in a 10-team league, an 8-team league, having those high-tier tight ends, high-tier quarterbacks, it's a little bit more valuable for you because there's you're trying to differentiate yourself. But I still think Trey McBride is absolutely worth the cost there. So he's someone that I would plant my flag on. Maybe I'll just pick one at each position for you. At running back, it's a little tough, but I think that James Cook, who I'm currently drafting right now, oh, that's a bummer. But James Cook, I think he's someone that I'm super excited about. I think he's really appropriately priced as somebody that could easily end up being a top 5 running back if everything breaks right. I think he's one of the more talented, explosive running backs in the NFL. He's a guy that I think is in line for a really great workload this season, and I think that people are not pricing in the fact that he doesn't even need to score touchdowns to be that good. If that goal line role did come to him, that'd be something that we got to consider. So we got Trey McBride and James Cook. At receiver, there's a lot of options I would consider here, but more and more, I think that wow, that's tough. So some guys that in general I'm targeting, like I love Marvin Harrison, but I don't want to give you 2 Cardinals. AJ Brown's someone that I'm targeting a lot as well, but I think it's a little bit too expensive for me to tell you to plant your flag on that. Tank Dell, I think he's really appropriately priced. He's someone that I'm super excited about, so he might be the guy that I would recommend. Yeah, let me just pull up the wide receivers that are left here. Yeah, I think it's pretty Tank Dell. Tank Dell is definitely, I think he's someone that I'll plant my flag on for you there. And then at quarterback, I'm going to say Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love could potentially win the MVP this season. I think he's in line for a monster year, and I think he's someone that I'd absolutely target. He's not going to cost you a lot. So no big tier names there, but yeah, those will be the 4 guys I'd tell you to plant your flag on. So Jordan Love, James Cook, Tank Dell, and Trey McBride. I think those 4 are going to be really solid for you, and they're not even going to cost you that much. So hopefully that helps. If you have any other questions, let me know, and keep that coming as well. Anybody else in the or watching the stream, happy to answer questions for you guys. Obviously, we're mid-draft, so I'm happy to do that. Obviously, lots of time to sort of twiddle our thumbs while we try and wait to get a good value on these guys, but I should be able to answer questions as I do that. So thanks for the question, Isaac. So we've got Nico being nominated here. Nico's someone that I'm super excited about as well. Obviously, can't let him go for super cheap. Sucks seeing that we still have this auto bidding these guys up, but I'm willing to go up to near pre-draft value here. He's someone that I'm going to feel really excited about as my wide receiver 3. If I can get him for $19, that would be absolutely insane. There's no way the people in this draft let me do that. Yeah, of course not. But I'm still willing to go up. I'll go up to 25 here. I think that's no problem. He's someone that I really do think could potentially be a top 10 wide receiver again. Obviously, you're drafting him to do that, but I think it's well within his range of outcomes as someone that should be the number 1 target for what should be a really good offense. So I like him quite a bit. I will go up to the pre-draft value. Not going to go any higher. That sucks to see. Mason seems to be having internet problems or something, so he's auto-picking every time he leaves the draft. Yeah, good. I'm glad Bulldozer's going to take it. Don't like seeing people get guys just because they disconnected on accident. So that's good. I've got a bidding war here. I was surprised to see the slow crawl up for Nico. He's normally a hot commodity, someone that I think people are really excited about. Someone who I've also been warming on quite a bit is DK Metcalf. I think he's actually a guy that, he's going to be the wide receiver 1 for Seattle, and more, I think that Seattle's going to be an offense that should be really good. I think they're going to be an offense that's going to be up-paced. They're going to run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. So you're going to see a lot of Lockett, DK, and JSN on the field. Geno Smith, I think, is better than people give him credit for. And then on top of that, the Seahawks defense, as good as Mike Macdonald is as a defensive coordinator, I don't think he's just going to magically fix this defense. They're not a very good defense from a talent standpoint. They've got a couple of good young corners. Don't really have a lot in terms of pass rush. They've got a good defensive tackle in Byron Murphy that they took in the draft, but nothing we can really guarantee there. Their linebacker core, not something that's very special. I think there's a lot of reasons to expect the Seahawks defense to struggle this year, and that's kind of music to our ears in fantasy. We want to see a situation where you are a team that's playing from behind a lot. It's going to put yourself in a spot where you can really rack up a lot of points in the back half of games. So we want to see a lot of shootouts, and I think we could see that in Seattle this year. So DK is a guy I'm more than willing to pay his pre-draft value here. He's someone that I think belongs like a tier higher. I think he belongs maybe even in that tier with guys like Nico. As someone that I think, he's got top 10 upside in his range of outcomes. We've seen him be a top 10 wide receiver before. He's really talented. He's got crazy touchdown upside. He's a big body. We know he's going to be involved near the red zone. And if he ends up being your wide receiver 3, I think you're in a really, really good spot with your roster. So, God damn it. Just, if you're going to bid me up, just do it earlier, Bulldozers. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens here. If I don't get him for 25, I'm probably going to punt the position or punt that, but that's really great. So that's our wide receiver 3 there. Love that for the roster here. Now the question for me really is, so again, I've got the $40 left. We've got quarterback, flex, and then, defense kicker and the rest of my bench. So that gives me $28 for my quarterback and flex. Pretty good spot to be in if I wanted to do that. Like I mentioned at quarterback, I think I'd prefer to get Kyler Murray here. If I can get him for 3 to 5, I think that's really great. And then it's just a matter of, how much do I want to prioritize getting a high-end running back? Like I could get Josh Jacobs here. He'd be someone that will really stabilize my running back room between him and Gibbs. I think that'd be really great. And then it's going to hurt my bench a little bit to do that, but I think I'll end up with a lot stronger starting lineup. And then generally in these 10-team leagues, I try to prioritize and emphasize my starting lineup a little bit more. Just the smaller of a league you're in, there's a lot more opportunity to get value on waivers, and I don't want to put myself in a spot where I'm sacrificing my starting lineup for bench guys that I might not even use over the course of the year. So in general, I care about depth less and less the smaller my league is. In a 10-team league, it's about as small as I really go. I don't really do 18 leagues ever. So 10-team league here, I think it's certainly something that I think you could be a little bit more aggressive on your starting lineup and just really try and hammer that out. And also, Montgomery's great. He gives me a really solid, a warm, fuzzy feeling about my RB2 here. It makes me feel like I've got a decent one. But in general, I think I would obviously much prefer somebody like Josh Jacobs as my RB2. I think he's got a ton of room for growth this season. He's going to see potentially 250 to 300 touches in this Green Bay offense. Green Bay's got a shot to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. If you told me Josh Jacobs finishes this year as a top 5 running back, I wouldn't be shocked at all. And he's someone that I really do think is someone that's worth targeting, especially on ESPN where he's only $20. So certainly worth noting there. We got Deebo being nominated here. Deebo's fine. I think he's, the upside he had got nerfed a little bit with the re-signing of Brandon Ayuk. There's no chance that he's just the only wide receiver in that room, and that does limit his upside a little bit. But of course, we do know that Christian McCaffrey, he's been known to get banged up from time to time. George Kittle, he's a guy that can get banged up, and Deebo is still so necessary to the offense. So if Deebo ends up being your wide receiver 2, I think it's totally fine. I don't view him as a wide receiver 1 in fantasy, but he's a really solid wide receiver 2, and I'd feel just fine with him on my roster. Crazy that for me, he'd be my wide receiver 4 if I targeted him, so I'm feeling pretty good about my starting lineup, although my RB2 is a little bit of a weak spot there. Okay, I can feel the voice going a little bit, so 1 second. Okay, so yeah, Deebo for 22, though, that's a perfectly fine value. So now we're waiting for the nomination here. Josh Jacobs is nominated. I'm absolutely going to be involved in this. He's just going to make me feel a lot better about my running back room. I know I got Monty early to just sort of give myself the flexibility the rest of the way, but that didn't mean I was necessarily punting running back 2 for sure. Because I didn't get Jalen Hurts, it opened up the opportunity here for me to spend a little bit more on my bench spot or on my flex spot, give myself a better one here, and not necessarily feel like I need to force it. That being said, Josh Jacobs could absolutely be one of the players that just gets crazy outbid. I think he's pretty underpriced, and it seems like the couple guys that have been underpriced like crazy, I think the people in this draft room are pretty on top of it and pretty sharp, so they're certainly not letting that happen very often here. We've already seen it with Kupp and Devon Achane, so we'll see what happens. I'm willing to do the $22 bid here. Hopefully they let it slide. I'll feel a lot better about my running back room if it does. Oh man. Oh man. Okay, so um, okay. I'm not gonna go up to 25, so we'll see how it goes. For me, I think at running back, probably just punting RB2 at this point. We'll be happy with it. Maybe fill things out here. Maybe get Tank Dell. He'll make me feel really good about my flex spot. Ridley's a target. Waddle is someone I've loved, although I'm a little bit worried about the injury. So we'll keep that in mind. While we wait for this bid to fill out, I got another question from Isaac again. Said, thanks, Zach. Super helpful channel. One more question. Are there any running back rooms that you would draft both of? Lions, Titans, Rams jump out to me. Well, I guess obviously the obvious answer is going to be Lions. If you are watching the live stream, you'll see that I did that. So I think that's certainly something you could do. The Dolphins are another example. I think in general, if I draft Devon Achane, I kind of want to leave my draft with Raheem Mostert, so that's certainly one that I'd make an effort to do. Rams, obviously, that's a great one as well. I think they're a spot where, if you draft Kyler, I think you really do want to handcuff him with Blake Corum, so that's a really great question. Beyond that, I think the Bengals are one to consider. I think Chase Brown and Zach Moss both have a ton of upside. I don't mind. Like, if you're spending $1 on either one of them, drafting them both really late, one of those guys is going to be good for fantasy. I think it's possible that, we see a situation where it's a 50-50 split, but the way I see it, just from the questions and the answers that I've seen from Zach Taylor, sounds like, they're like saying, they want to get these guys involved, but there's going to be situations where you'll have someone come in off of special teams, so that's going to be someone else getting the ball early on that drive. To me, what that says is that Chase Brown, who's been a kick returner before, I think Chase Brown's probably going to be the guy that's not getting the full workload there, so I think Zach Moss will be the main guy. He'll definitely get the goal line role, but regardless, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So the Bengals are an answer to that question. No problem drafting both of those. The Titans, they're an option. I don't necessarily hate doing that. I've grown a lot more optimistic about Tony Pollard over the last several weeks. He's someone that just the playing time we saw in preseason, we saw Tony Pollard play the full first series with the starters, and then we saw Tajay Spears playing into the third quarter with Mason Rudolph last week. Not a death sentence or anything for Tajay Spears. I think he'll still be totally fine, but it does feel to me like Tony Pollard is the 1A and Spears is the 1B, and Pollard's looked good for me as well, so I don't necessarily mind drafting both of them, but in general, I think with the Titans specifically, I'd prefer just to draft Pollard at cost right now. I'm trying to think of any other ones. I think that, there's a lot of examples. I think that the Broncos kind of stand out to me a little bit because I think that both Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin could catch a lot of passes, and they're both cheap in drafts right now, so I think they both need to be considered as options there because they're guys that I think, especially in a full PPR format, are going to be usable, and they're super cheap, so they've got definitely... they definitely apply there. I'm trying to think if there's any others. I guess the Cowboys, if you want to consider just late round dart throws at guys like Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott, you can consider that. Trying to think of any other options. Vikings, not really, but I think Ty Chandler will be involved, so you could consider that. But I don't think you'll ever really play Ty Chandler unless you see an injury to Aaron Jones, so not necessarily one that applies there. Are there any others? I think the Bears, believe it or not, I think kind of makes some sense. The playing time in the preseason for Khalil Herbert was surprising to me. I think Khalil Herbert has a shot to be involved early on in the season, so I would want to at least keep him in the back of your mind. I think we might be surprised when week 1 happens about how much he played compared to DeAndre Swift, and my bad there. But yeah, I think we might be surprised how much Khalil Herbert plays. So he's a decent, late dart throw. Good point, Isaac. Yeah, I think all 3 Dolphins. Jalen Wright also needs to be considered. Oh, and the Steelers. I think Najee Harris and Jalen Warren have potential upside here. They don't really have any pass catchers. Obviously, they missed out on Brandon Ayuk. So it's going to be a really run-heavy team. Russ likes to utilize the running backs out of the backfield as well as pass catchers. So I think they'll both be involved enough. I'm a little bit scared off of Jalen Warren, just injured guys going into the start of the season scares me a little bit, but certainly something that I'm not afraid of. I'm nominating Tank Dell here. Really want to get Tank Dell on the roster. If he's my flex, I'm going to feel like I've got a lot of flexibility as well. Wow, just spitting it up to 10 right away. Huh. Those were some bad intentions, whoever did that. I have a bad feeling I'm going to overpay. I'm going to have to overpay for Tank Dell here. But we'll see. Maybe they'll let him slide. Just a little bit of an overpay. Oh, that's beautiful. $12 for Tank Dell. That is awesome. If he's my wide receiver 4, I feel so good about my roster there. And now I've got a ton of flexibility here. So you see I got a max bid of 18. Um, Calvin Ridley is going to be tough to pull off, but I am super stoked about him this season. But there's still a lot of other guys. I don't want to put myself in a spot where I have no more running backs on the roster. Like I want to target Tony Pollard. Um, Najee Harris is a target for me as well. So I want to consider those things and make sure I have the money for those guys because now at this point, I think I'm sort of just I filled out my starting lineup with guys that I'm super stoked about, and I ended up with money left over. So now I'm just gonna sort of shotgun approach the RB2 situation. But for $9, I can't let Calvin Ridley go. Okay, that's fine. I can't justify spending that much more than this just because my roster construction right now. But Calvin Ridley's an absolute steal there. I think he's going to be surprisingly undervalued by people a lot this season. So okay, we are getting kickers now. That's great. I can't believe I didn't have the foresight just to get rid of kickers in this league. Public announcement, everyone in the subscriber league, we're getting rid of kickers next year. I don't like kickers in fantasy, so I'll be getting rid of them, even though he's got a fun name. But um, yeah, just not a big fan of kickers. But regardless, here, so yeah, waiting on the next nomination here. Um, Paul is making me laugh. Okay, Jordan Love, someone I'll certainly consider as well. Don't necessarily need to go Kyler. I think they're both really similar to me, and I don't want to pass up the first one while waiting for the second one. So I'm not going to overpay because Kyler's still on the board here. Like I generally say, there's 10 quarterbacks that I'm really satisfied with. You go down to Dak and Burrow along with Love and Kyler. That's the end of a tier for me. You could consider it 11 if you want to consider Jaden Daniels in that. But what that means for me is that if you miss out on the top tier of Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, you should probably be the last one in your league to spend on a quarterback in a 10-team league because everybody's going to get one unless someone's weird and takes two. And that'll happen. Like somebody's going to have extra money and they're going to decide they want to target a second quarterback, but it's not necessarily important to their roster. I don't think they won't force it like that. So I think it's perfectly fine doing that. Rashee Rice, buckle up, everybody. We're going to get a bidding war. He's going to go for much more than $6. So we'll watch this. I bet he goes for 20. And it's probably worth it too. He's been one of the most mispriced players in fantasy over the last several months. And it was just because we didn't know anything about the injury status or the suspension status, but it sounds more and more like he's not going to be suspended this season. And if that's the case, he's probably going to be a low to mid-tier wide receiver 2 for us. He'll be the number 1 target for Patrick Mahomes, and it's tough to say that's not worth at least $14. So we'll see if we get up to 20 here. That was my guess. I'll feel pretty cool if I get that right. So we'll see what happens there. But no problem with these overpays. I can see Mark really came in here with some real intentions here. He obviously went and overpaid for quote unquote overpaid for Devon Achane. He's going to overpay for Rashee Rice here. It's fun. It's fun to see guys that they came into the draft with some preset beliefs and they figure these guys are mispriced and they're willing to overpay for it. So I appreciate people that have those unique opinions. They're not necessarily wrong either. It's really fun to see people willing to do that. $20, that's a lot. I don't think I'd be willing to go there though. Like you're spending up just as much as Debo. I'd rather have Debo than Rashee Rice, and I'd rather have Metcalf than Rashee Rice, and Nico than Rashee Rice. Like he's not in that tier for me, but he's certainly a guy that I think is going to be really solid, and I've got no problem with what happened there. So Mark's getting his guys, and I think that's certainly a one approach to have in fantasy, especially in an auction draft as well. Is like you're just going to feel a lot better about your roster if you leave it with the players you came in trying to get. So I'm never going to knock anybody for having a strong opinion and just making sure they got their player. CJ Stroud, I don't think he's necessarily worth $9, but for me personally, like I'll go to 5 because I have Tank Dell. He's a stacked opportunity here. I love Kyler as well, but I was prepared to spend up to $5 on Kyler, and if I get CJ Stroud for 5, I'll feel really good about that. That's really fun. That's awesome. I wasn't really planning on doing that, but still got a stack. Still got a really high-end quarterback, and he is someone that I think he's obviously got top 5, top 3 upside of the position if he can put up a career year. So that's fun to see. Really satisfied getting Stroud there, and now we've actually got a decent amount of money to play with for our bench. $23 left for our bench here. Lots we can do with that. We're obviously spending $1 on our kicker and defense. That gives us $3 for each bench spot. That's a lot of flexibility. I know that doesn't sound like a lot. That gives you a ton of wiggle room here. You can do almost whatever you want. Like I'm not gonna be able to go. I mean, I could consider getting George Pickens. He's certainly someone I could consider. I like him quite a bit. Deontay's a guy that I've been really high on. Terry McLaurin is someone that I think he's going to have a lot of opportunity. But again, I want to make sure that I'm prioritizing the running back position just a little bit here. Obviously, if you want to poke holes in this lineup, the weak spot is my running back too. I've got David Montgomery there, and I'm playing Jahmyr Gibbs. So if the Lions are surprisingly bad, if the Lions have a bad week even, it's going to be really tough for my roster to win games. So I don't want to be too exposed to the Lions here. So I think I do want to try and find some other guys. If I can get Pollard, if I can get Najee, if I can get Mostert, if I got all three of those guys, I'd feel really good about my running back room. And then beyond that, I just want to fill it in with some receivers I like. But there's a lot of receivers going really late for like $1 that I think are really great values. Why not? I'll just spill it right now. Anybody listening to this stream, they can block me later on. But so for example, Darnell Mooney, I think he's a really great $1 guy. Brian Thomas Jr., I've gotten super excited about him for $2. If you can get him in an auction draft, I think he really could be a huge difference maker for you guys this season. Maybe not right away, but I think over the course of the entire season, he's going to be a really meaningful impact player for the Jaguars. Jameson Williams, I know we're all just waiting for him to break out, but I think it really could potentially happen this season. Rashid Shaheed, really fun flex option to have. Khalil Shakir, I think more and more I'm pretty confident he's going to be the wide receiver 1 for Buffalo, so I try to get Khalil Shakir quite a bit. Michael Wilson, he should be wide receiver 2 for the Arizona Cardinals. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for him. Dontavian Wicks, really fun. Obviously, if you're on fantasy football Twitter or anything, everybody loves him. I mean, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes metrics that say he's really good. Yards per route run, targets per route run. He cracked a lot of metrics that you'd want to see last season for guys that you expect to take a leap into year 2, and it's just a matter of whether or not he can get on the field. And I think he'll find his way there eventually. I think Dontavian Wicks is a really great dart throw. It's just that it might take a little bit for him to earn that role, but he's someone that if you want to take late in drafts, if week 1 he comes out and plays 70% of the snaps, you're going to know you've got a stud right then and there, and he's someone that I think could be absolutely worth it later on in drafts. We run out a little bit after we get past that, but that's still a lot of guys that go really late that are certainly worth considering. If your league rewards punt return and kickoff return yards, Marvin Mims, he'll be fun. Rashid Shaheed would fit the same mold for that. But lots of receivers that go really late that I think are absolutely worth considering. So just fun to keep an eye on that. So we keep going here. We got Evan Ingram being nominated. We just saw Jalen Waddle go for 20. I consider getting in the fray there, but I also obviously have a max bid of 15, so I couldn't have done it anyway. But I think Jalen Waddle's going to be really solid this season, but he's going to be someone that I really do think could potentially put up a career year. I mean, the concern is that he's just missing time with injury, and obviously he's been a little bit iffy, but I think that in general he's been someone that I expect really big things from this season, even though I'm cooling on him just a little bit because of the injury news that we're getting pretty late in training camp too. That's a little bit scary, but I'm not afraid of Jalen Waddle. I'm just not necessarily targeting him the way I was earlier. My turn to nominate again here. I think we're going to nominate probably running backs that we want here. I want to make sure that if we're going to have to overpay for a player, I want to get a running back to make me feel better about my roster. Tony Pollard. He's someone that I'm planting my flag on. I think he's going to be a top 20 running back this season. He's a guy that I really do expect big things for this year. He's someone that, we saw him handle a huge workload last year. Obviously didn't work out. But the thing is with him over the course of his career, he's been super efficient when he's had to share a backfield. It was a year coming off of a broken leg last year. Reasonable to assume he would have seen decreased efficiency last year. But after week 10, he was PFF's number 1 ranked rusher. I mean, they had an easier schedule as well, but he did visually, to me, look better. And from what I've seen in him in preseason this year, he looks to be a lot more explosive. So I think Pollard's going to be back to his efficient self. I think that the Titans are going to be sort of sneaky good on offense as well. And with all that, I think it makes Tony Pollard a really, at least, interesting proposition for a player. So as someone that you can draft as your RB2 if you want. I had a pretty big buy-in league, or my biggest buy-in league draft this earlier this week. I ended up with a running back room. My starting running backs are Alvin Kamara and Tony Pollard. I promise my wide receivers are a lot better, so sort of offs that. But I was comfortable doing that because I do believe that much in Tony Pollard. And maybe I'll recap those rosters as well. Maybe I'll do a video sort of recapping the rosters that I put the most time in drafts into. But I think that in general, I'm putting my money where my mouth is there, and believing that Tony Pollard's going to be someone that can be useful for us this season. So excited to see what he can offer. And he makes me feel a lot better about my RB2 spot when I have him and David Montgomery. Raheem Mostert's probably the next running back I'm looking at. Najee Harris, he's fine, but he and David Montgomery sort of fill the same role for me. It's just a guy that I think I can plug and play and hope they fall in the end zone. Monty's probably a little bit more likely to do that than Najee, so I just prefer Montgomery to Najee Harris, to be honest. And I don't think I would necessarily be eager to start Najee over either David Montgomery or Tony Pollard, so I don't necessarily want to pay up. If I get him for $5, I'm interested, but I'm not going to overpay for Najee here. Lad McConkey, he's super exciting. Haven't heard a lot about him in training camp, honestly, over the last several weeks, but the tape in college, I think he's really good. I think he's going to fit right into the NFL system here. I think he will pretty immediately be the wide receiver 1 for the Chargers, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So Lad McConkey, I still think he's a perfectly good pick and someone that I do expect big things from this year. Just sort of doing a budget check. Again, we've got $18 left. We've got 6 bench spots and 2 a kicker and a defense. So we've got $16 for our 6 bench spots. We can spend just under $3 per player. That means I'm interested in Chase Brown for 2. If I don't get him for 3, or if I don't get him for 2, that's fine. But if he's my RB4, that's totally fine. I'm pretty satisfied with that. I think there's a lot of opportunity here for both Chase Brown and Zach Moss in that backfield. Honestly, I can't tell you which one's going to be the more valuable asset. If I had to pet, I think it's going to be Zach Moss, just because I think he's going to get the goal line work. I think they're going to use Chase Brown on special teams more. I won't be shocked at all if Chase Brown's the kickoff returner for the Bengals, and if that's the case, I think it's going to make Zach Moss more important to the roster. I think they trust him in pass protection more as well. So it'll be interesting, though. I really don't have a great hold on what's going to happen there. It's one of the things I'm looking forward to seeing in week 1. We see Devonta Smith here. Obviously, I think he's a great player. I think that the problem with Smith is that you're just sort of banking on him being I don't see a world where he's a super reliable weekly asset. I think it's going to be a boomer bust situation where he's a much better wide receiver 3 for your roster than a wide receiver 2. I think he's a guy that you don't want to need to put up big numbers every single week, but a guy that will put up big numbers 5 or 6 times this season, and he'll end up with decent counting stats. He'll end up with over 1,000 yards. He'll probably flirt with 6 to 8 touchdowns and be a guy that's going to be good, not great over the course of the season. And he does have that built-in upside if something were to happen to AJ Brown, but I just don't necessarily love the value there. He's not someone that I do find myself targeting all that often. Amari Cooper, I think he's a much better value than Devonta Smith. It's going to be a really, really pass-heavy offense in Cleveland. They've got the receivers to do it now. With Jerry Jeudy coming over, they're going to be a lot more spread offense, up-tempo. They might not necessarily have the quarterback to get it done, but Amari Cooper was fantastic and on a fantastic pace last season with Deshaun Watson. So I think he's totally fine. Not necessarily going to be fun to watch the Browns play, I don't think, but I think he'll be, Cooper will be a guy that once again returns value at his ADP and ends up being just a good, not great draft pick. So yeah, we saw Cooper go for 11. I think that's totally fine. I've got no problem with that value. Waiting for the next selection here. If you're just getting into the stream or whatever, so this is the subscriber league draft I'm doing. There's 10 of us in the league. There will be, we'll be obviously be doing this every year. So if you didn't make it in this year, just keep an eye out, stay active, stay watching the channel and all that. And next year, only the winner of this league will be for sure in next season. So there should, in theory, be 8, potentially 10 spots open next year if we open it up to 12 spots. Could consider doing a 14-team league if we needed to, really fill or open up as many spots as possible. So if you're interested in doing that, I'm just now seeing S. Brunden's message early on in the streams to asking if he can join. Too late for this year. I'm really sorry about that. But of course, if you are interested, just let me know next year. We'll be doing this every year. It's going to be a lot of fun. I was really enjoyed last season, and it's really fun trying to go up against you guys when I know you guys already know what I'm trying to do. So yeah, really enjoyable. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this, and obviously we'll try and keep doing this every year, and I'll try and provide some updates on it throughout the course of the season as well, so people can see how we're doing. and help keep you guys engaged with what's going on with this as well. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this and are curious as well. I got JSN going up here. I think JSN's got a shot to potentially break out this season. He's not someone that I'm necessarily targeting. For all I've said about DK Metcalf, I like DK Metcalf. He's a guy that I think is going to have a really good year. I don't think that JSN is going to clearly emerge as that wide receiver 2 in the offense. I think he's got a shot too, but I think Lockett's good enough to hold him off there. And I don't think that Geno Smith in this offense can support 3 reliable fantasy wide receivers. And I think what's probably going to happen is that JSN and Lockett eat into each other enough that neither one of them is particularly useful. JSN's got the upside. He's worth the dart throw, but if you're drafting him to need him, I think you're going to be potentially really disappointed in what happens there. So just keep that in mind with JSN. He's obviously got a ton of talent. He's worth the upside, but I almost didn't bid there because I wasn't realizing what was going on. But Ramondre for $4 would absolutely be worth it. I would have been more than satisfied to get him there, but I'm not going to overpay. But I do think Ramondre could catch a lot of passes and be reliable enough for us this season. For me here, looking to try and maybe target a running back again. I don't think they'll let me get Najee Harris. I'll try and get Mostert. I'm sure everybody in this draft can spend $10 on him, so that's going to be great. But, yep, that's great. I'll go to 6, but I don't think I'll go any higher. Raheem Mostert has been one of, if not the most underpriced players on ESPN and almost all platforms for the entire draft season. He's a guy that could easily end up being a top 10 running back again, and it's tempting to bid 8 on him, but I'm not going to do it. But I'd have had no problem doing it. I think he's well worth that. He's a guy that should be really good for us this season, and obviously he's a guy that we know can be a top 5 running back. He did it last season. He's going to still have the goal line role. I love Achane. This is going to be a Dolphins offense that's fantastic, but the Dolphins have the easiest strength of schedule for the running back position in the entire NFL. There is plenty of reason that both of them could have really good years, and I think there's just no reason to be out on Raheem Mostert, even if you are in on Devon Achane. So just keep that in mind. Pickens being nominated here. $11 is really great value here. I can't necessarily afford it in this spot, and he doesn't really fit the roster build, but for $8 he does. Okay, I won't go in here, but yeah, for $9 I'll do it. He's worth 9. He's a guy that is going to be the wide receiver 1 for the Steelers. I don't exactly expect the Steelers to be a prolific, high-octane offense by any means, but they're going to be better than they were last season, and George Pickens put up over 1,100 yards last year, scored 5 touchdowns. He's going to at least do that again this season. Russ gave Courtland Sutton a double-digit touchdown season last year. I think he can absolutely do the same thing with a better player in George Pickens. Maybe Russ just likes throwing into the number 14. You can go even back to Seattle with DK Metcalf. There's a lot of reasons to like George Pickens. The talent's there. The opportunity's there. Ayuk's not going to come in and break things up there, and I think there's a lot of reasons to like him. Terry McLaurin, someone I've warmed on a little bit as well. I think he's going to be a guy that we can play pretty much every single week, and I didn't necessarily expect to get him there, but I think it's a perfectly fine draft pick. He's a guy that, he's potentially got the best quarterback he's ever had in Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels is a guy that's coming off of winning the Heisman, second pick in the NFL draft for a reason. Looks the part so far in preseason. I think he's going to be good enough to make Terry McLaurin fantasy relevant. And then obviously Jahan Dotson is not there anymore with the trade of him over to Philadelphia. It's going to be a potential 30% target share for Terry McLaurin, and if Jayden Daniels ends up actually being good, I think he still I at least think he's going to throw a good enough deep ball that we're going to see a lot more explosive plays out of Terry McLaurin, and just that I think is going to open the ceiling up quite a bit for him. And if Terry McLaurin ends up as a top 20 wide receiver, he's going to be well worth his ADP, and I really think he could do that this season. So we got 5 bench spots left here. We're going to fill those with $9. Of course, this is sort of what I was mentioning earlier, that in general, I want to emphasize trying to get a top-heavier bench if I'm ending up spending money on my bench, because, again, a lot of the guys you're drafting for $1 at the end of the draft, you're not going to be keeping on your roster throughout the entire course of the season. Zeke's worth $2. I don't care that he's disgusting and not good at football anymore. I need running backs, so I'm certainly going to consider him. But yeah, it's just that I want to have a bit of a top-heavy bench so that I can consider moving on from those guys early on. Something that I'll give you guys a lot of advice on, and I will mention, of course, after the first week of the season, is that, especially for those of you guys in fab systems, the best waiver ads every single year are week 1. Go back to last year, you had Raheem Mostert, you had Kyren Williams, Tank Dell was like week 2, Puka was week 1. Those kind of players, they emerge right away on the start of the season, and if you don't have guys that you're confident in being able to drop right out of the gate, it's tough. Like if you draft a rookie, nothing against drafting rookies, right? But let's say I draft Blake Corum, who I like a lot. I'm probably going to consider drafting him in this draft, but I'm like week one comes around, Kyren Williams is still the RB1. We didn't really learn anything. We just know Corum's the handcuff. It doesn't mean that I'm going to feel good about dropping Blake Corum because I'm still going to be holding out hope for an injury there. So you want to have guys that you're going to feel like you can drop if you need to. You want to make sure you're getting guys on the end of your bench that are sort of like guys you're going to learn a lot about in week one. So, Dontavian Wicks, great example. Jameson Williams, great example. If their workload or their role is different than it was last season, then you'll know right away in week one. You'll be really happy you have them. And if it's not, you move on. You take the guy that's the new hotness on waivers that week, and you're putting yourself in a really good spot to potentially find that year's Kyren Williams, that year's Raheem Mostert, Puka, Tank Dell, all sorts of really high-end waiver ads all happened really early on in the season last year. The guys that go on to waivers later on, there's not really like a mid-season breakout that isn't injury-related. I mean, you can think about Jerome Ford last year. Devon Achane, maybe a little bit later, but it was like a week 3, I believe, situation against Denver, and that's because he missed the first couple games due to an injury, so sort of a unique circumstance there. So, in general, the really good players on waivers, they're going to emerge right away, and you want to be ready to do that. So make sure you don't have, like if you're a guy, I'm trying to think of an example. Like a lot of people, when they're in auction drafts, they're going to spend, $20 on every single player, or around that. And what ends up happening is your entire bench is really good, and that's nice and that's great, but what that means is who are you going to drop in week one when you really want to get that high-end player? You're going to be frantically trying to make a trade because you want to make sure that you can, upgrade your roster a little bit before you take on that next player on waivers, and it's going to be tough to do that. So, in general, I think it's just good to be a little bit top-heavy-ish, so that you have guys that you're going to feel really confident in dropping once the season starts. Chris Godwin for $3, just going to highlight that. That's a really great value. I know it was an auto draft, so not necessarily someone making a really good decision, but at least to start the season, the Buccaneers have the easiest strength of schedule for the first month of the year. I think their wide receiver is going to be really good to start the year. Mike Evans is a popular target for me. I think he's going to open the season really hot, and I think Chris Godwin really could as well. So both those guys are absolutely worth monitoring and could be really good this year. Cowboys defense, we're nominating defenses. Sure, go ahead. It's fine. If you want to talk defenses for week one, a couple of my favorite targets. So one of them is actually the Seattle Seahawks. They opened the season with a game up against the Denver Broncos, and then they played the New England Patriots in week 2. So I think you're going to get 2 weeks of very useful streaming out of the Seattle Seahawks. Cincinnati Bengals are a really great option as well. Again, they get the Patriots in week 1. I think they're going to be a team that we'll be potentially targeting with our defensive streams this year. Not a great week 2, obviously, for the Bengals. They play the Chiefs, but in weeks 3 and 4, they get the Commanders and the Panthers. So 3 of 4 weeks, I think the Bengals will be really good. Other options, the Steelers are a pretty solid option. You're looking at a situation where they get the Falcons in week 1. Falcons aren't exactly the best matchup, but it's not the scariest matchup either. I think there's reasons to be excited about that potentially. And then on top of that, I think that after that, you're getting the Broncos, you're getting the Chargers, who I don't exactly expect to be a world beater, and then you're getting the Colts, who I think could be a little bit more turnover prone than we're expecting. And obviously, the Steelers are a really good defense in general, so they've been a pretty favorite target of mine. We're going to see a lot of turnovers, a lot of sacks created by that defense, and that's a good matchup setup streak as well. Jesse, really, you're gonna not let me get Khalil Shakir for $1? That's a bummer. Shakir's a guy that I really do think is going to emerge as the wide receiver 1 for the Bills, and he's someone that I really was trying to get for $1. I was trying to not necessarily talk about it while I was on stream here. Hopefully you guys were maybe listening in and too enamored by my defensive streaming discussion to notice that I was trying to slip Shakir by for $1, but it didn't work. And that's fine, so we move on. We got Zamir White up here. I think Zamir White's just going to be the classic dead zone running back this year. There's a lot of reports that they're going to be a bad offense. They're going to be a slow pace of play team. So you're looking at a guy who's going to operate on first and second down, not catch passes, probably not going to have a ton of scoring opportunities. For $3, you can't go wrong, so I have no problem with it, but I'm out regardless. So no problem at that price tag for $3, but the ADP of $7, where you're drafting him in actual drafts, you're spending like a 6th, 7th round draft pick on the guy. Not something that I can get behind. He's not a guy that I'm targeting in drafts right now. Keon Coleman, he's obviously got a ton of upside. There's no reason to fade him other than the fact that I don't personally think he's very good. So obviously maybe that's a harsh criticism on my part. I don't think he's necessarily a bad player, but I just think he's going to be Gabe Davis again. He's a bigger body. I think he'll be useful for them in the run blocking game. That's great. He's going to be a useful NFL player, but he's not necessarily a separator. Hasn't historically won contested catches either, so I don't really know what role he's going to fill in terms of being like an elite pass catcher. And I think Khalil Shakir is going to emerge as that guy. He's really fantastic after the catch. I don't think people appreciate that enough about Shakir. Uh, not a special talent, but I think he's good enough. He's got the most chemistry with Josh Allen in that offense. I really, really do think Khalil Shakir is going to be the wide receiver one in Buffalo, and I think he might end up being like a top 36 receiver, and he's someone that I am absolutely targeting right now. We saw Brock Bowers go for $1. Um, that's fine. Brock Bowers is totally acceptable. Ty Montgomery. We're digging deep there, Mark. Um, okay. I honestly don't even know what that nomination is. I feel like I have to ask him. Um, looks like he didn't mean to do that. Okay. Well, that's how it goes sometimes. Um, whatever. Moving on. Christian Kirk, perfectly fine value, but again, I mentioned it earlier. I really do think that Brian Thomas is going to be a pretty big difference maker for us this year. He's someone that I'm really excited about, and someone that I really do think could provide a lot of value for us this season. So, I like Christian Kirk enough, but I think he's just like a low end flex play, and I think Brian Thomas is the one with real upside. Sorry about that, Mark. Hopefully it didn't screw you up too much. At least it was just a player. You can drop him right after the draft. That being said, moving on to Xavier Worthy here. Um, Xavier Worthy is a guy who could potentially be a monster in fantasy. He's someone that I think is worth the dart throw, even though I think every part of me is just telling me it's not going to work out. It feels like every single year the Chiefs add a new young fast wide receiver and everyone gets super excited about it, and then he ends up not being good at football. See Mecole Hardman, see Sky Moore. So, you could Justin Ross even. Like, it happens every single year for the Chiefs. Maybe Xavier Worthy breaks that mold. I think he's at least a little bit better than those guys I just mentioned earlier, but I don't really think he's an elite route runner. I think he's just fast, and he wasn't necessarily that great on go routes even last year either. So, he's fine, but he's not someone that I necessarily believe in the talent of. So we'll see what happens there. Could easily be wrong, and I'm willing to draft him at cost just in case I'm wrong, but he's not someone that I'm targeting by any means. Deontay Johnson, someone that I'm super excited about this year. I won't get him for $4 here, but I really think Deontay Johnson could catch a ton of passes and be a huge difference maker for us. So, absolutely someone that I think is worth considering. I think if you end up getting him as like your last flex, I think he's a perfectly fine guy to play there, and someone that I think is going to be surprisingly useful in PPR formats. Let's not forget how involved Adam Thielen was last year. Dave Canales, I think this Panthers offense is going to be at least better than it was last year, and I think it's going to open up a lot of opportunity for both Deontay and maybe even Xavier Legette could be sneaky good. I think that Jonathan Brooks, when he returns, could be good. The offense might be a little bit better than people are giving them credit for. James Conner. James Conner is certainly a consideration here. I think I have to bid for. Damn. Okay. Didn't get him for 4. It's always scary bidding your max offer because you're putting yourself in a situation where you're snake drafting the rest of the way. But James Conner would have been well worth it. I think he's a guy that I think could have potentially been a difference maker for us. Looking at running back here, I'm going to go all the way down to Jaleel McLaughlin. I've been saying it, for a couple weeks now. I think that Jaleel McLaughlin is going to be a guy that's going to be a really popular waiver ad after week 1. I think he's a really solid guy to target late in drafts, especially in full PPR formats. If you go a little bit lighter on the running back side, I think you'll surprise yourself by how useful Jaleel McLaughlin is over the course of the year. I think you can start him in full PPR and get some points out of him. And if things break right, I think you might even get like a solid RB2 if things go right. We can think back to Reggie Bush, Alvin Kamara. I mean, there have always been RB2s in Sean Payton's system that are not necessarily, the guy that gets the most touches in that offense. And they end up being really good for fantasy, and I think that Jaleel McLaughlin could absolutely do that again this season. So, not saying he's going to be Reggie Bush or Alvin Kamara by any means, but I think he could be a light version of that, and for a dollar, it's well worth it. Keenan Allen, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him this season. There's a lot of reports that he's coming into camp overweight. I don't know how much validity there are to those reports. He didn't look very good in the limited action he had in preseason. I think Rome Odunze at this point is a better player than him, so I prefer Rome, honestly. I think I'd rather have Rome Odunze than Keenan Allen. There's more upside there. It's just obviously like an upward trajectory for the player instead of a downward trajectory. So got to keep that in mind, but not by any means bad. Chuba for $2 is something that I will consider here. He's a guy that I can use for the first month of the season pretty easily, and then if things break right, maybe he's good for the entire course of the year. So he'll really help fill out that roster there. He's someone that I do like quite a bit, but not for a roster where you actually have really good running backs. But so basically, it's just a matter of like, do you feel like you'll need him in the first month? With my current roster, I think it's possible. Between Monty Gibbs or between Monty Pollard, Zeke, Chuba, McLaughlin, I could see myself getting a start out of Chuba there. Maybe Jonathan Brooks takes longer to come back. So we'll see what happens there, but I think Chuba is at least worth the $2 bit dart throw if you ended up going light on running back. So we'll see what happens there. So we've got two more bench spots to fill. That means we get to spend $2 on each of them. We've got a kicker and a defense we want to fill out here. A little bit thin at receiver because I've obviously only got the four in the starting lineup, and then I've got Justin McLaurin on my bench. So I do want to try and grab one more if I can. Brian Thomas is going to be a consideration for sure. So Najee goes for 4. Obviously, would have loved to grab him there, just didn't have the money to do it anymore. I do think that between all the running backs I've got on my bench, I think they're gonna pan out, at least one or two of them. Like Pollard's a guy, like I said, I'm super stoked about him, and I'm really confident in Jaleel McLaughlin. It feels weird being that confident in a $1 guy, but I really do think he's gonna be useful. So, no problem with the backfield here between Jahmyr Gibbs, and then I can just piece together that RB2, and then I'm just gonna get carried by my wide receiver room here. So really do like the team so far. I'm really stoked to see what has really played out. I think this is a really good start we're looking at here. Cortland Sutton for $2. Nothing wrong with it. I don't think he's in line for a huge year, but he should be the leading target for an offense that probably sucks. So do with that what you will. I think you can play him in a pinch if you need to. Just not normally the kind of guy that I'm trying to target at my wide receiver position. I want guys with a little bit more upside. For me here, I'm more than willing to spend $3 on either Jaden Reed, Rome Odunze, or Brian Thomas. If I can get either one of those guys for $3, I will absolutely do it, and then I'll just snake draft the rest of the way. They're guys that I really do think are potential difference makers. I think Rome Odunze is probably going to take a little bit longer to come on than the other two, but Rome's a guy. It's really fun to get these high-end rookies late in drafts. And one little tip I like to give, and it's something that I've noticed more and more over the years, is that when you get these rookie receivers and running backs, but receivers specifically, when they have those boom weeks at some point over the course of the season, they're really easy to trade for a lot of value because people just think, okay, the breakout's happening, and you can often capitalize on a breakout week before the breakout actually happens and just get full value for the player because everybody's expecting that breakout for Brian Thomas, for Malik Neighbors, for for Keon Coleman, for Rome Odunze. Everyone's expecting that breakout to happen at some point. So when they see that big week, which will happen for Brian Thomas at some point, he's a really explosive player. They're going to use him downfield. He's going to have a 100-yard and 5-catch touchdown and a 5-catch, 1-touchdown game probably sometime in the first month. When he does that, if you want to trade him, you absolutely could for a guy that's, he should be able to return a lot of value for you just because of that draft capital he's got, how talented he is, and the situation coupled with potentially a big week. So it's just something to consider as well with these rookies. You don't even necessarily need them to be good for the whole season to get a lot of value out of them. You can just take them, trade them when they blow up, and then whatever happens beyond that, you already got value. I can give some examples. Last year in my biggest buy-in league, after a couple really good weeks for Josh Downs and a couple down weeks for Rachaad White, I straight up traded Josh Downs for Rachaad White. Then obviously Rachaad White went on to have a massive year the rest of the way. Jaleel McLaughlin last year, I traded him and DeAndre Hopkins for Jalen Waddle after a really bad stretch for Waddle. Those rookie guys, when they have a couple big breakout games, they really do start to separate themselves, and like managers notice that and get really excited about them, and it's sort of easy to gain value. Like, sure, when I said those two trades, you all thought, what the hell happened there? There's no way those trades got accepted, but like one of those two trades was proposed to me. It's just people really wanted to get those rookies after they start breaking out, and it's certainly something you could take advantage of. So Jameson Williams, if I can get him for $1, that'd be a really great close to this roster here. Give me just a couple more upside darts for the wide receiver position, especially with my wide receiver room here. It doesn't make sense for me to take a guy like Adam Thielen or Jerry Jeudy or Tyler Lockett. Like those are guys that don't have upside like Jameson Williams or Brian Thomas do. And with how good my wide receiver room is, I want to make sure that I'm only drafting guys that have a shot to crack my starting lineup. And Jameson Williams does. If things break right for him, he's got the talent to be really awesome. So that's really great. We just filled out our starting lineup there and our bench. So now we just got to go with kicker and defense, and then we'll get you guys out of here. There's no need to make you guys watch the rest of the draft and really fill out everything. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun with this. Hopefully you guys are enjoying these. I'll try and provide updates throughout the course of the year. I should do a lot more live streams as well over the course of the season as well. I think I'll try and get you guys. I'll do the live stream every single Sunday morning. I'll answer your questions and all that. So stay tuned for that. Now that I figured out how to stream my screen as well, maybe I'll do that instead of just talking to you guys in the camera. So that should be a lot of fun, and hopefully we just have a lot of excitement coming forward. It's 6 days until the first actual football game. That's super exciting, and should be a lot of fun. Dell, thanks for the comment. So your question is, how do we get in on subscriber league drafts? So this is something I do every single year. This is the second year I've done it so far. So all you got to do is just comment in the comments or shoot me an email that you're interested, and it's mostly first come, first serve. I try and give people a little bit of time to respond or accept the invite, and if they don't accept it, I'll just send it out to somebody else. If we get more and more interest, I might try and spread it out and maybe accept actual you might have to write up a little blurb of why you should be invited or something that we have to something to pick you guys off of. But generally just express your interest. I'll bring it up again next August. I'll try and bring it up early August, and then we'll get it scheduled for sometime around the end of August, beginning of September. So this is the only one I do. I don't want to be in too many leagues just because then obviously it's tough for me to focus on all of them. So just one each year. I'd be happy to maybe set up different leagues for everybody. If people wanted to have community leagues, we could work on that. Maybe I'll get get a Discord channel going or something like that. Maybe that could work out in the future. But for now, just you let me know in the comments. Let me know that you're interested, and then I'll add you to the league when the time comes. So next year, keep an eye out. That way we can get you in. It should be a lot of fun. Would love to have you for sure. Jonathan Brooks, I think he's a really great option as well, actually. I think he's a guy that could easily be, especially in a league that has an IR, which I should have mentioned. This league does have 2 IR spots. I don't really draft focusing on that, but I think it's certainly something to consider. But it's just not necessarily a priority of mine. But if you do have a league that's in an IR, if you do have a league with IR spots, it makes guys like Nick Chubb, Jonathan Brooks, TJ Hawkinson, those guys a little bit more valuable because you can pick them up, put them on your IR right when the draft is over, and then go straight to waivers and grab another player, and that way you're sort of just stealing a roster spot if you do that. So there is value to doing that. It's certainly something to keep in the back of your mind. I just sort of use it as a tiebreaker more than anything else. Speaking of Nick Chubb, here he goes. The thing with Nick Chubb, I don't know. I think he's totally fine at this price tag for $1, so I've got no problem doing that. But the issue is just that I've seen a couple drafts where he gets a little bit out of hand. I've seen him go for $10 in some drafts, and I think the issue there is that I just don't think he's going to be ready until he'll come back in week 5, right? That's assuming things stay on track. If he comes back week 5, how much does he look like Nick Chubb at that point? Is he a guy that we still want to play on a weekly basis? They're going to have to ramp up his workload over the course of the season. I'd much prefer Jerome Ford at cost. I think he's a guy that could be useful the entire season, and as much as I'm rooting for Nick Chubb, I just don't really see a path towards him actually being a meaningful fantasy contributor this year. But yeah, so yeah, just waiting here. Gonna take kicker and defense, then we'll close things out. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun with this. Like I said, I'll try and do more live streams this year. I'll at least do one every single week, Sunday mornings. That way I can keep you guys updated. I'll answer last minute start sit questions. Can't believe that we're just, 9 days away from that first Sunday. That's going to be super exciting. Can't wait to watch some football. I've been waiting for this for a long time, and I'm sure all of you guys have as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you guys. Hopefully you guys are enjoying these videos. I'll try and provide updates over the course of the year on the subscriber league as well. I'll keep you guys updated on some of the leagues I'm doing as well. I know some of you guys have been curious to peek behind the curtain a little bit, see what's going on there. So I'll give you guys some updates with all that stuff. And yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And hopefully the subscriber league's a lot of fun as well. It was a lot of fun last season. Believe it or not, I didn't make the playoffs, so I gotta do better than that this year. So hopefully I can, make it seem like I know what I'm talking about a little bit better and actually come out and have a much better year. So we'll do that for sure. Mark my words, I'm making playoffs at least. I'm definitely winning this league. Really like this team so far. So we'll see what happens there. And yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And hopefully you guys are enjoying all this. And yeah, hopefully this has been enjoyable. And then of course, if you guys have any questions, you guys, of course, before the end of the stream, you're more than welcome to leave them in the comments here. I can answer them live right here. And if you don't get them in time, you can just put them in the comments. They'll go up on YouTube, and I try to respond to every single comment I get. I believe I've still done that. So for as long as I can keep up with them, I'll try and respond to every comment I get, and that way, just love interacting with you guys. It's a lot of fun and really fun just to sort of, build a community here, and it's just really cool that you guys care at all what I have to say. I still don't get over that. I get a kick out of that every time I think about it. So yeah, it's really fun doing this, and I'm just getting super stoked. So yeah. We got our Steelers defense. Just got to get a kicker here. Jayden Reed comes up for nominations. He is nominated. He's a guy who's obviously, I think he's a really good value right now. That pre-draft value of $4, I don't think that's high enough. I think he's a guy that's got he's got top 10 upside at the position. We saw him put up a stretch last year where he was that good. This is an offense in Green Bay that really could be a top 3 offense, to be completely honest. And if Jayden Reed truly is the wide receiver 1 in the offense, if he takes a step forward, and I mean, with all the injuries they've got in their backfield, Marshawn Lloyd's not healthy. A.J. Dillon's going to miss the whole year. Jayden Reed might get utilized out of the backfield a lot more than they were initially anticipating as well. I think he could be a little bit of like a baby Deebo for us and could end up being a lot of fun for fantasy. So don't sleep on Jayden Reed. I think he's a really good option, as is Christian Watson. So both Packers receivers there. And honestly, all 4 Packers receivers. Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, Jayden Reed, all 4 of them. I like the value on all 4 of them. I can't honestly tell you which ones or one of them ends up being a huge fantasy contributor this year, but there will be value in that backfield, and I'm absolutely targeting it for sure. So just keep that in mind. I think there's a lot of opportunity in that, not in that backfield, in that receiver room, and I think that between the 4 of them, probably 2 of them end up being really good for fantasy, and I don't know which ones. It's probably Christian Watson and Jayden Reed, but Romeo Doubs is a really talented player. He could certainly get it done. Christian Watson gets hurt all the time. And then Dontavian Wicks, he's a guy that's really flashed when given the opportunity. So he's still worth that late round dart throw as well. Just waiting for us to get our last pick here. It looks like we screwed up. I got $2 left in just my kicker, so I'm going to end this draft with $1 in all likelihood. Well, I'll nominate the kicker for $2, so I feel better about myself, but really happy with how I budgeted this draft as well. I think this is going to end up being a really good team and being a team that I can absolutely work with. The wide receivers are going to be the strength of this roster, and I'm going to have to really fill in that RB2. Hopefully he's on the roster already in either Montgomery or Pollard or McLaughlin or Zeke. I think there's opportunity for all of those guys to potentially be meaningful, but even if there's not, I'll work the waiver wire. It's a 10-team league. There will be waiver wire acquisitions at the running back position that are useful, and if I can fill that in, the entire rest of the squad is absolutely stacked. So just to summarize the roster here, we've got C.J. Stroud at quarterback to go with Dalton Kincaid at tight end. At running back, we've got Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Tony Pollard, Ezekiel Elliott, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Chuba Hubbard. At wide receiver, we've got A.J. Brown, Marvin Harrison, D.K. Metcalf, Tank Dell, Terry McLaurin, Brian Thomas, and Jamison Williams. And then at defense, we've got the Steelers defense, really good starting schedule, really good defense. And with our kicker, we've got Harrison Butker, who I just grabbed because he was $2, and it made my team have $0 left, so I felt perfect about that. So, yeah, really good team. I'm really stoked about it, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun this season. So, yeah, I appreciate all you guys, and I can't wait for football to start. And then, of course, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Good luck to everybody else that's still finishing out their draft, finishing out their rosters. It's going to be fun competing with everybody. Sorry, Paul. Didn't mean to steal Butker from you. I just had $2 left, so I had to do it, and it was fun to fill out the roster that way. Alrighty, appreciate all you guys. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Should be a lot of fun this year. So I'll catch you with the next video, and obviously we'll get you guys primed for week 1 here with the next couple of videos coming up. So catch you later, guys. Peace.